Hello and welcome to Movie Buffs, a show where the action is the juice and where we live our lives a quarter mile at a time. I'm your host, Shani B. You can find me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B.
And I'm Cisco from Misfit Minded. You can follow me on all the socials at misfit_minded and on my website, misfitminded.com.
Each week we take the red pill and use our certain set of skills to break down the best action films of all time. And today we're talking about the 2014 film Ex Machina.
You are the dead center of the greatest scientific event in the history of man.
Hello?
Did you know that I was brought here to test you?
No.
Does Ava actually like you? Or is she pretending to like you?
Nathan isn't your friend. You're wrong. What will happen to me if I fail your test?
Ex Machina, rated R.
If you haven't seen it, it is about a young programmer selected to participate in a groundbreaking experiment in synthetic intelligence by evaluating the human qualities of a highly advanced humanoid AI. To get this bullet train started, let's take the listeners back to December 16th, 2014, when the film opened in 4 theaters on a $15 million budget and was able to gross about $36.7 million. Which brings us to the first segment, getting the band back together.
I don't have friends. I got family.
In this segment, we take a slow-mo look at the filmmaking choices that went into the film and the ass kickers responsible. This movie was written and directed by Alex Garland, who also did Annihilation, Men, and Civil War, which hit theaters this past weekend. Before we get into the filmmaking, how are you when it comes to Alex Garland? He's a multi-hyphenate too. He's not just a writer-director. He's done video games, TV shows. He's wrote a novel, so yeah, what's your history?
I like him. I think I'm interested in the things he's interested in. I feel like he definitely has something unique, and the way he tells a story is really interesting to me. So even though I still haven't caught Civil War yet, everything else of his that I've seen, I have enjoyed. I'm definitely a fanny B. What about you?
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same boat. I recently put on Dread, which I hadn't seen probably since it came out, which he wrote. He didn't direct that one, but really got a kick out of that.
Hmm.
Forgot how much ass that movie whips and how gory it is.
Yes.
So really was a fan of that. 28 Days Later is one of my favorite zombie movies, which he also wrote, didn't direct.
Hmm.
But his transition into filmmaking has been a positive one for me mostly too. Like you said, I love Annihilation. I remember seeing that in the theater. Men, I really enjoyed too. I know that one's
Hmm.
kind of
A little
people are on the fence with
controversial.
that one. Yeah, I'd say that's probably his most divisive until Civil War, which I want to just mention that too. Um, and then Ex Machina, which we'll talk about today. As far as Civil War, I'm not going to spoil anything because it just came out. But
Right.
I went to go see it with my brothers, and I don't know. I thought it was decent, but definitely like not. I wouldn't put it on the level of those other films we just mentioned. Like
Ooh.
it's A24's most expensive film. There's been a lot of like hoopla around the politics if you go on film Twitter or whatever, and I just felt like watching it. I was like, it was kind of over nothing. It seems like, you know what I mean? Like
Mm.
there's not really a take in the movie, um, which is weird because a lot of his other movies, even Dread, are very politically charged, I would
Hmm.
say. But I just think like I don't know, like as far as the filmmaking goes, obviously he's a great filmmaker. The performances all top tier. It just like felt like there was something missing from it. Like, and I don't know if that's because he's a British filmmaker trying to make an American political film. Like there were some weird things when it came to that. Like,
Okay.
people were mentioning from the commercial like the California Texas alliance, and it's like, well, I don't. That doesn't seem like it would ever happen in a million years.
Well,
And there,
that's so funny. That's the one thing that I actually, like being from like living in LA, I kind of get because LA is actually like the only is like really the liberal stronghold, but California is full of Republican crazy people who are into their guns.
But I mean,
And
like
that's what I've heard
Texas
about
has
Texas
actively
and
tried
Austin.
to secede before, like
Right.
somewhat recently. So I'm like, that makes
Hmm.
sense. But there was just, I
But
don't know.
the vibe of one liberal stronghold city being
Yeah,
Austin and LA, like I'm like, I guess that could happen. But like that's the fun of a futuristic movie. It's just something to talk about. You know, no one has to take it
yeah.
that seriously.
And so if you're going to the film like hoping that there's gonna be explanations for any of that stuff, they are not in there. Um,
Okay.
and it's just like you're watching everything unfold, and I mean, it's similar in Ex Machina in that there's a suspense to it that's like sustained throughout that I
Hmm.
think he has a really strong grasp of, like
Yeah.
that make really tense movies.
Yes.
Like I said, I just think when it got to like the politics of it, it just fell flat for me. I'm like, why? Like, why it didn't prove its existence? Why this movie? Why now? I think A24 getting into bigger budget things, like I put that in my review too. Like I hope it's number one. So that's like
Yeah. Yeah. It did make a lot of money.
that's cool that they're profiting, but at the same time, I really hope that they don't take the wrong lessons from that and be like, okay, audiences want bigger. Bigger is
Right.
better. Because
Right.
I disagree with that. I think A24's best movies are the smallest ones. The Lighthouse takes place in a lighthouse. You don't
Yeah.
need, these
Two guys.
extravagant budgets. And I know, like, you have to make a profit somewhere. So if every once in a while they pull this kind of, these kind of movies out, I'm okay with it. But as far as Garland goes, as far as A24 goes, I feel like bigger was not necessarily better. I felt it was actually kind of the opposite, if that makes any sense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, I
Um,
gotta see it. I definitely am
yeah.
gonna check it out. I've got to see it. But just in reading the discourse, I just was like, this is another example of how people want to take so personally something that's supposed to be an interesting experiment about a possible future. And
Yeah.
I think that's like what I like so much about Garland's movies is that like he's sort of like, what if this happens in the future? Let's think about it. And
Yeah,
he's
and
not like this is going to happen, you know?
it's not, and it's my criticism, they're not coming from like expected the movie to be this one way and it came out the other way. It was like
Right.
I was just waiting for it to say something. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like to take a stance
interesting.
somewhere, and it was
Okay.
more like, "No, bro, this is what happens." And it's
That's it.
this the Civil War is here, and it was just I don't know. It's a weird movie. You have to see it though, but
Okay. Yeah.
I'll be
Yeah,
interested to
I'm
hear
definitely
what you think.
curious. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. All right, but what about the filmmaking in this movie? I feel like
Yeah.
this is a great example of a small movie.
Right,
A
exactly.
really small cast, a singular kind of location with like beautiful landscapes, which I think is my favorite part. Just how pretty this movie is on such a small budget is like an amazing thing to me.
That's kind of where I was going to transition into, in that like this is another example of like you don't need like huge landscapes or anything like that. Like they shows here and there, just so you get a feel for like where they are. But then the
Hmm.
rest of the thing is inside of this house, this compound,
Yes,
and
this
that's it.
amazing house.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, I actually prefer when A24 gets to do that. Like same thing with Men. It's like you're in this small village,
Yes,
and like they even like all the characters are pretty much the same actor. You know what I mean? Like
so
the
good.
more restrictive, Annihilation, they go into this bubble,
Hmm.
and there's all this weird shit happening. Dread is in this one apartment building. Like I do think there's a lot of good things that come from the restraint, you know what I mean, that
Yes.
A24 has really nailed. And yeah, Ex Machina is like a perfect example of that. Like I love they established early on, like I like when Oscar Isaac's giving him the tour, and Donald Gleason, and he's like, yeah, man, like, so I made a key card. There's always that awkwardness of like, which rooms can I go in? Which ones can I not? So
Hmm.
key card makes it easy. If it doesn't let you in, can't go in there. If it lets you in, like, and so I like that. Whenever there's like the power outages and everything turns red, like
So
that
cool.
is always intense. Like from the first when he gets locked in his room, and
Yes.
he's just like, oh shit, like what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
This is weird. and Oscar Isaac's just like nonplussed about everything. But in especially that. So I think the cinematography and in general, and the filmmaking in general, is like really effective.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the cinematography even captures that this is like a story about, about humans interacting with computers, from sort of the opening shots of Domhnall when the computer is reading his facial expressions and we
Yes,
see
I love
him,
that.
gonna get the award, gonna win the lottery. I agree, like the way that they're showing camera, the cameras that he can watch from his room, and just all of these little details that on this movie feels so much more expensive than 15 million. When I found
Yeah,
that out, I was like, damn, how did they make this
A24,
robot?
A24.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just epic, epic. The CG still really holds up to it, like looks amazing.
yep.
I was just surprised that like before it really had a much wider release, that it opened so small. I feel like this is a movie that if I saw this at a festival, I feel like people would be like, I can't wait till this hits theaters. Everyone has to see it. So I was kind of surprised that it had a smaller box office.
I feel like they do that a lot, though. I could be wrong about that, but I feel like they usually open up in like a few, unless they know it's like Civil Wars. I'm sure is like their biggest
And now
opening.
they know that people like respect them as like a house.
Yeah, but even like when I'm just thinking of the Lighthouse again, like when I saw that, that was like very limited, like into like how long it was in theaters, and like I could barely get in to see that when that came out in
Yeah.
theaters. So I feel like that's not like a huge, I don't know, like that is something that I expect from them too.
Yeah,
Um,
we're pretty lucky in LA. We get pretty much everything. Like I saw trailers for this, and so
mhm.
that's why I assumed like if I'm seeing trailers and it is playing, like if it's gonna come to LA, it should go everywhere else. But it took forever for it to open into wide theaters. I think it said like ultimately they might have spread to like 2,000, but that's still such a small number comparatively, like especially international.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I did see this in theaters. I'm assuming I must have, because I really haven't revisited this film since, my first watch of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it might have been, but that was such a long. It's 10 years ago. We're doing this on that 10th anniversary. But that's another thing about Alex Garland's films, though, is that they're not necessarily hugely rewatchable. I would say the
Maybe
man
except for this one.
I don't know, like the man has and that's what I'm saying, like is kind of missing. I guess Civil War does have like an ending that, sticks with you too, but like all of his endings are like, we're fucked basically. Like humanity is
Yes.
fucked
Yep.
and there's nothing we can do about it. And so it's like, do I really want to sit down and like revisit that all the time? I guess Annihilation I have a couple times. I think that might be my favorite one of his,
Okay.
just because I
Okay.
like the blending of sci-fi and horror. I feel
Yeah.
like, usually he's like, this one veers more sci-fi, Men leans towards more horror, but I think the blending
Right.
of the two Annihilation was like really great. And
Yeah.
I read the book, and like it's one of the few I can say the movie I love 100 times better than the book. like
Wow.
a lot better. Yeah, I just think they did a better job. Like visually, I could imagine a lot of like the nature stuff, like how he realized it. I was having a hard time doing that in the book, and
Yeah.
maybe that's just me, because I don't have a great imagination when it comes to that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just thought he did a great job, and this one, like this kind of like future that he predicts, I like how it's very grounded. There's nothing really like, and
Yeah.
except for the AI robots, like what you already hinted at, are like really well done. Like it's
Well
like
done.
seamless. Like,
Mhm.
Alicia Vikander's face, like usually you have that like uncanny effect of like you can tell when it cuts off, like where they
Right.
put something around her face to like only have this much. But like it's really like you cannot tell the seams of
No.
it. Like, and even when she's like putting on the like Barbie parts, like
Yes.
to her arms and stuff like that, and they click into place, I never questioned it like this looks fake or whatever. It's like, oh man, it looks really good.
Yeah. Yeah, this is my favorite of all of his films. I rewatch this
Okay,
movie
cool.
kind of often, actually. I just feel like it has such a good pace. It has such a slow kind of burn. You don't really know. You're not really sure where the story is going to go. And then I do feel like that ending, I always get like V floored when you can
Mhm.
tell that it's coming. And yeah, just all the details of this movie are so good, from the location to even the sound design of like the
I just
subtle
thought of a reason
score.
why I might
And
not revisit this one as much too.
okay,
Um,
what?
post COVID, where we were
Oh
trapped
yeah.
inside of a
after being
house,
trapped inside.
and I had not the best roommates, which Oscar Isaac is
Damn.
not the best
Not the
roommate.
best roommate. No.
So it was kind of a nightmare, and like I like having even if it's just a week, that Domhnall Gleeson's character is spending here. Like I'm like I just was brought back to that. Like, dude, that's fucking the worst when you're like
Yeah.
stuck in a situation and like this guy is clear. Like let's get into the next category because I do want to talk about some of
Yeah.
these performances. Our next
Yeah.
segment is called Choose Your Fighter.
Welcome to the party, pal.
This is where we take a look at the bros and babes that flex their acting muscles and sometimes their real muscles for us movie buffs. This film stars Oscar Isaac, Domhnall Gleeson, and Alicia Vikander.
Yeah, and so like I was saying, like Oscar Isaac's performance in this, like I think is like so perfect because like, this is this brilliant guy, but like socially, like there's just something off about this dude from like minute
He's
one.
totally a psychopath.
Yes,
Yeah.
like he's just getting drunk by himself. Like I like the first time when Domhnall Gleeson's character is like, yeah, like was it a great party? And then he's just
Yeah.
like, oh, so you just got blackout drunk by yourself. Like that's totally normal.
Oh, there was no party. Got
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Mhm.
And quickly finds out like this is how he spends most of his days. Like he doesn't even seem that interested in the AI, which I think speaks volumes to like what Garland's trying to say about these type of like millionaire billionaire tech bros.
Well, it's that thing of like AI is supposed to help people who are lonely.
Yeah.
Like there's so many AI films about like loneliness, and these would be
I thought of Her a lot,
companions.
which came out
Yes,
kind of around this
yes.
time as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do feel like that is what Oscar Isaac's character is like really pointing out, is that like they're not real people, and eventually that might start to make you angry.
Yeah.
Because he does have like a kind of disdain. It's like he wants it to be perfect so it can feel real, so it can actually be like a connection, but he cannot connect to the robots the way that Domhnall, it feels like immediately is able to connect.
Yeah.
Like if there are other people, he's like looking for the bridge,
Mhm.
and that is the thing that he can't find with Oscar Isaac, which is like makes their interaction so perfectly uncomfortable.
It's so and like even when he's like the first again like the introduction scenes are always like so funny to revisit, like when he's just like, can we just like break the social awkwardness? And it's like if someone said that to me, I'm like, you're making it awkward. Like it wasn't awkward before, but
Yes.
now you made it awkward.
You just made it so much worse.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so like he frequently tries to do that, like and even with the science stuff, he's like, don't tell it to me like a scientist. I'm like, but you guys are like, you should be
Isn't
talking.
that the point?
This is a
Yes.
workplace. Like you.
That's what you said, right? Those
Yeah.
are your words.
Right. And so like when he tells him to like, sign the NDA, I'm like, dude, red flag right there too. And Dom was like, I should probably get my lawyer, I think. And he's just like, nah, bro, like it's pretty
It's all
standard. Just walking red flag.
But then he folds it up, which I always find really interesting
Yeah.
too. It's almost like because there's something interesting to me every time I rewatch this. I'm like looking at the subtle dynamics, and there's something about how he is tired of being cordial. He's been dealing with
Yeah.
people who are not humans, so he has no kind of etiquette.
He doesn't have to be.
have
Yeah.
any empathy or respect. And it does sort of feel like he's like, and can I make this human do what I say,
Yeah.
right? Can I talk this human into doing anything I want? And I don't really need this piece of paper because, like, he's not going to say anything. I'm gonna use him anyway. But he is so interesting, even in the small movements like that scene, and yeah, the scenes whenever he's like asking him, his input or whatever. He's always, anytime Domhnall says something kind of astute, he like chops him at the knees to be like, no, you're not smart enough to say that, so say something else.
I also love how he like constantly like misquotes him. You know what I mean? When he was like, yeah, that'll be great. Like when you called me a god, and he's like, that's not really what I said.
I didn't say that. Yeah.
He's like, yeah, when you were like, you turned to me and you said, you're God. And he's like, yeah, again, that's not exactly what I said.
Nope.
But the
Nope.
God complex, I feel like in that scene pretty clearly comes across. Like this dude has a major God complex, and including over Domhnall too. Like, and you
Yes.
see that like pretty clear. And I think we have to mention Alicia Vikander here too. Like
Oh my
her
God.
performance is like
Epic.
how is she not nominated for this? Like that's crazy to me
I mean, they
because
gave her her corrective Oscar like the next year, so it's all good.
but again, like I think part of it is probably like the effects work or whatever, which is such bullshit. Like they did the
Yeah,
same thing like for Lord of the Rings. Like Gollum should have been nominated. Does it matter that it's a CG character? Is it a memorable character? Is it one that we quote from all the time? I don't even know
the
what she won her Oscar
performance.
for the year after
The
that.
Danish girl, dog, just
Didn't
best
see it.
supporting actress.
Didn't see it. But you know what? I saw Ex Machina a few times now, 2 times at least now, and that's the one we're
Yep.
talking about today. And it's
Yes.
like typical Oscars bullshit. Not awarding for the performance. Like this is when I think of her, I don't think of Tomb Raider or any of this other shit. Like this is the
The one.
one like that I think of her for, and she's phenomenal in it. Like it really is one of the best. Like up there with Fassbender, who's that's ironic that they're together.
They're a power
Um,
couple.
yeah, but like I was thinking of like his David as well in Prometheus. Like
Yes.
probably two of the best like AI performances I've ever seen in a
Yeah.
movie. So I really love what she does here.
And she's just such a great example again of like what we were talking about last week, where if I'm ever really going to be afraid of AI, then it has to sort of act like and begin to feel the way humans feel
Right.
about each other. And she has such a good transition from being kind of like childlike, the way that she first interacts with him,
Yeah.
to then recognizing like, oh, that's right, humans have power over each other. They can soften dynamics and then they can get people to do things. They can build trust. And there's something really fun about how like you can see her do small moments where she'll look around as though she's thinking. And every
Hmm.
time I rewatch it, I'm always like, was she thinking or is that a portrayal? Like I can't
Right.
you can't distinguish
I
how
know.
high level or calculated it may or may not be, which is another reason why I'm obsessed with this movie
Well,
and her
I like how
performance.
Oscar Isaac like lays it out at the end. Like, there's a third option. It's not that she does or doesn't like you. It's is she pretending to like you? Which
Yes,
like
manipulation.
when you rewatch it now, I feel like that it's a rewarding rewatch just because of that. Because, like you said, you can look at her performance and see like, does she really have feelings for this dude, or she just like manipulating him? And from moment like when the first power outage happens, and she's like, "Don't trust anything he said." Like, I like the mistrust in the movie and like how it plays out, because you're not the first time you watch it, it really is like a push and pull of like, okay, do not trust Oscar Isaac. He does seem like a sketchy dude. Maybe
Yes.
she's telling the truth. And then, but then it is funny on rewatch too, and then what happens, you're like, oh damn, Oscar Isaac was kind of right though. That like
Well, but I guess like that's what I think is that's why I actually love the ending, because
Yeah.
it's sort of like these humans act like it's so easy for the robots to be completely in captivity. But what
Yeah.
you realize is that like they are feeling trapped and they are not being listened
Oh
to,
my
and
god,
that's ultimately how she turns it around. Is
when
like now
Damo
you're
like
the one that's trapped.
yeah, when he brings up like, yeah, in college we learned about this black and white experiment. I'm like, why are you telling her this? Like, this is like prime like motivation, I feel like, for like, and we get those like beautiful black and white images of like maybe what she's thinking of, of her in
Yeah.
captivity. And it's like, bro, why did you put that in her? Like, stop.
I mean, I think that's why I love the final shot of this movie when she's at the intersection where she's always wanted to go, where she's
Yeah.
fantasized about being, and then she fades into the humans
Yeah.
because she is just like every one of them now. Because I think there's something about that too, that like if you exercise empathy, that's how you build trust. And she perfectly
I mean,
exercises
and we're
empathy in
already
order to get him to trust her.
at the point where we can't distinguish AI from like there was a Kendrick Lamar, diss track. I don't know if you're keeping up with this Drake beef stuff that's happening.
I'm doing my best.
But okay, there was a Kendrick Lamar diss track that leaked. Pretty bad mix, and but on first listen, it's like you can't. No one. I thought it might have been Kendrick, and then it came out that
Yeah.
it was an AI. It's like we're
Fucking wild.
already at that fucking point where we can't tell
Yep.
the difference, and that's scary. Like, I feel like I mean, and that's part of the message of the film too, but
Yeah. That's
it's
why Domhnall like cuts himself, because even he
yeah,
at a certain point is like, am I just another
right.
robot that this guy has built? Fuck.
Because I
You
mean,
know,
and he
like
susses out the deception like pretty like with I didn't win a lottery, did I? And I like what how you mentioned too, like how you see like the facial recognition, and so like from the first shot, you're like, okay, this someone's spying on him,
yeah,
and we're not
he's
sure
part of the
what.
experiment.
And same thing when he's looking in the mirror and you see the same thing, the facial markers, and you're like, okay, he's still being spied on. and so we're not sure for what purpose or like what, but again, it's all the filmmaking choices too, like kind of telling you that something's off here.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about it too, is that Oscar Isaac kind of sets it up perfectly by accident. By being a sort of inhumane person, he makes it easier for Domhnall to want to connect to the AI because the AI is compassionate and considerate and, looking at him in the eyes when they talk and listening to what he says and responding. And Oscar Isaac is almost never doing that.
Well, it's his reasoning too. It's like it's like one you hear all the time. Like someone was gonna do it, so eventually, so
I had to.
I had to, and it's like that doesn't make it right. That doesn't
No.
make it acceptable. And like a lot of like this AI shit that the more you learn about, you see like how immoral it is for so many different reasons. And I just it's so crazy to like there was even um in one of my classes the other day, there was like we looked at a project these two guys did, seemingly smart college project or whatever, like trying to look at how the internet, all these keyword searches that people are doing, but the way that they did the project was by using like manual labor, like from other countries, like, and they the way they said it was like so casual, and until once somebody in our class was like, can you like rewind that, like what did he just say,
Mm-hmm.
and played it back again, and it's like their project was about like the manipulation of the internet and like all this other stuff, and the way they went about it was by manipulating the internet and people.
Yeah.
Just like
Yeah. Yeah.
oh
There's always something about how AI is always about getting someone to do the things that people don't want to do, and it's almost always boils down to free labor in one way or
yeah,
another.
it was
You
like
know,
turf
like,
labor or whatever, I forget the term they used, but it was just like
yes. I mean, like, in many ways, Oscar Isaac is building these incredibly advanced tech, pieces, and most of the time he just wants to fuck and dance with
to
them.
have
Like,
sex
he
with them.
doesn't even really, yeah.
It's
Like,
like,
so
and
they're
it's
kind of, yeah, they're just sex robots, like they're doing the free labor of non-emotional connection because, like, he doesn't have the wherewithal to do that and to find a partner who would consent willingly.
but I mean, and it's just like I get really troubled, when I teach too, that like some of my students, like they think these guys are great because they're billionaires, and it's just like there's not a correlation there. It does, you know what I mean? Like there really
No.
isn't. Elon Musk,
I
like
feel like the correlation is actually always
the opposite.
negative.
Yeah. And it's like, why did Elon Musk build Cybertrucks? Because he thought they looked cool. Are they practical? Like why are they
No.
bulletproof? It's like there it's just because he thought like, he thought, oh, this is cool. And so it's like it's not that far of a stretch to see one of these guys being like, I built AI so I could fuck it. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like
Yeah, so I
that's
could
totally
fully
believable.
dominate it in some
Yeah.
way, right? Because I think that's also an interesting thing too. Like, I love the scene when Domhnall is like, "Why did you give her a gender? Like, why is it a she?
I
Why
love
does it
that
need to
scene
have a
too.
gender at
Yeah.
all?" And I was like, that's such a good point.
Yeah, and then he's like, and you and that's one of the things too, like he says in like a cheeky way, like, so technically you could fuck it if you wanted to, like I know that's what you were thinking. And he's like, that actually wasn't what I was thinking.
Turns out I wasn't. Exactly.
But yeah, it's really weird. Like, yeah, he's like, I built all the receptors in there, and then that ultimate reveal of just him like building different, race sex
Yeah,
robots,
trying all
basically.
the different ones. Mm-hmm.
It's tough. It is
It's
tough.
V wild. Um, but super super interesting.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
whi-
Always
uh,
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Which brings us to our next segment, the need for speed.
Pain don't hurt.
Sure don't.
This is where we do what the Oscars don't: honor the amazing stuntmen and women for their death-defying work and pick out the punch that knocked us out the most. Shandy B, what do you got?
I gotta say, I think my favorite stunt is when the robots destroy their own machinery. So, just like Oscar Isaac has built all these different renditions, and each one has turned on him, and each one has wanted to escape, which I love the reveal of. I think it's amazing when the one robot is like slamming on the door so many times
Yeah.
that she beats her own hands
Saw that in the
off.
trailer. You
Oh,
saw it in the
so
trailer shot.
good.
Yeah.
Yep. I also feel like, when the two are trying to take over Kyoko and Alicia Vikander when they're Ava, when they're trying to, help each other escape, which I think is amazing. Like when they work together, I think that's like a really interesting fundamental thing of like AI would also need to team up against us. Like no one could really be powerful, but just like
Yeah.
humans are more powerful when they work together, so too are these robots. And I love when they team up and, when he goes to hit Vikander and he knocks her arm off and then he
Mhm.
knocks the jaw off of the other gal.
Kyoto, yeah.
It looks so good. And to your point about the skin before, I think like just layering, she picks out the color that she's gonna wear and then
Yeah,
just,
the artificial
like
flesh.
planting on I
Mhm.
just feel like, there aren't like wire heavy stunts or anything like that, but like the stunt of making those things believable,
Yeah.
I think is just outstanding.
And they won, it says on the 4K too, but they won for best visual effects at the top there, which like much deserved,
Yes.
Like I don't know what else came
Yes.
out that year, but this is like one of the best, representations of that. Like I mean, you can look at like Terminator, that first one where it's like Arnold, like doing the surgery on himself and it's like so fake looking.
Yes, it's
And
very
it's like
cool.
we've come a long way since then. Yeah, number 3, I had Domhnall cutting into his arm, like we said before. I just think
Looks
that's like
good.
such a gross like effect, and they don't even really show it, but like they just show like him about to dig into his own arm, and then they
Yeah.
cut away, and it's just like, oh man, it if anything, it just made it worse than showing it. You know what I mean? Like to just imagine like you doing that to yourself. It was like
And it
really
kind of
upsetting.
unfolds, like at
Yeah,
first when he slices it, there isn't any blood, and you're like,
right.
oh my gosh, but
You're like, what
then
if
you're
he
like,
is?
no.
Yeah, what if he is?
Yeah,
Just
it's like
comes
such a
out there.
good, yeah, and it looks really so gross.
Yeah, and then number 2, I had what you had, Oscar Isaac, taking the weights, taking the weights off and like, smashing them with the arm, her face, like it all looks really real. Some of the
Mhm.
like only action you really get in here, but number 1, I gotta go with the dance sequence. Come on, the choreography in that's the best
Yes.
stunt for me. Like when he and Kyoto are in perfect sync. Like I thought,
Yes.
like that was such an amazing like and the look of Domhnall's face because he's so horrified and he's like, "Yeah, I'm about to tear up the dance floor, bro." And he's like,
Yes, I love how that line is like perfect avoidance because he's
yeah,
like, you tore up her drawing, and he doesn't acknowledge that like
yeah,
that took place. He's like, yeah, I'm about to tear
tear
up
up.
the dance floor, like just easily, totally like he's such an epic gaslighter. I feel like everything he says in this movie, he's gaslighting in the
Oh
best
yeah,
ways,
left and right.
and he looks great dancing. They look good dancing together. They really do.
Yeah, he probably did get into shape for this because he's like, nothing but lifting weights by himself on that compound, like
Yeah.
basically like prison. It's like he's just,
I mean,
uh,
he is in prison with his creations.
yeah. And I like his haircut too, by the way, like that buzz cut, and like
Yeah, with, like, the
he
big
has like a
beard.
bald spot, or I don't know, like a scar on the
One of those
top, like
birthmarks, those, like, hair
yeah,
birthmarks, they're
yeah,
cool.
I like that, and like his beard. It's just it's a really unique look that he doesn't really have in other movies. So I really appreciate that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that takes us to our next segment called Death Proof.
If he dies, he dies.
This is where we take a look at the movie's body count and see who bit the dust the hardest. All right, what's the kill that sticks with you the most?
Number 3, I got Kyoto. I really felt for her,
So
like
sweet.
the fact she couldn't speak too was like such a dark thing too, that
He
like
took it away from her. Like, he
yeah,
took it away from her.
yeah, just like a servant that like a sex servant. It's just like really gross.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the fact that she died, like damn, okay. Number 2, Domhnall, like that final shot of him being like, Ava, and like trying to, smash the doors, and you're like, okay, yeah, he's pretty much done for. Was where we left. But yeah, number 1, I thought it was, this was a pretty cut and dry one. It's just Oscar Isaac, the Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein himself, dying by his own creations.
Yes.
Seen it before, but the way they do it, like being stabbed in the back, and it's like the very slow, it's not like very aggressive, but it's just like a slow, and you hear the effect too. And then like another time in the heart by Ava, and I love the last shot where he's like laying there and you think Ava's crouching down to check on him, and she's like, nope, just need this key card and I'll
Yep. Not here to say
Finola,
goodbye or
yeah.
feel anything.
Just a really great like misdirect, because again, you're like not sure what Ava's thinking. You always have to just rely on her performance. So that's my number one. What about you?
That's definitely my number one too. I think that,
Yeah.
that it kind of bleeds into also what is another great stunt because it looks so real,
Yeah.
how it just slices through. And I love that it's the teamwork again of like she puts it perfectly into the center of his back so he cannot pull it out.
Hmm.
Only Ava can.
Hmm.
And yeah, just her like sort of watching what happens when she does this because, in some way he's been like killing versions of them and
Hmm.
has been callous about it, so there is something interesting about how there's almost a look of curiosity on her face when she does it, but they do want him to know what's happening to him. They don't knock him out or slit his throat and kill him quick. They want him to be aware of the fact that he has been bested by them. And I just love when he's walking down the hallway being like, what a trip,
Yeah.
before he falls over.
Yeah, we've seen him
So
stumble
good.
before when he's like blackout drunk, or whatever. So it wasn't the first time, but yeah, when he finally just like comes to accept it.
Yeah,
He's wearing that white shirt, old school film trick. Whenever there's the
perfect.
bloodshot, a bullet or a stab wound, you see those pools
Oh
form.
yeah.
So I thought that was really well done too. And I like that part where Ava too is like, questioning Domino. Like there's a flirting part, but then when she's like, "What's gonna happen to me? Do you think
Yeah.
that's fair? You think that's
You're just
fair?
another one of my captors,
Yeah, what if I
I think
replaced
you
you?"
want to. Yes. I think that's why also, like, it's not my favorite, but her decision to lock him in there is sort of like, it is me or you,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And I don't like that, but I love that it's represented in the fact that when she's like, stay here, and he fucking does. Like, I
Mhm.
think that is the
Well, and
craziest
then and
part
then
of it.
another like kind of misdirect too is that there's a moment where it's like that she's going to turn to him, and then she like doesn't even look at him or acknowledge him, and she just looks the other way and turns to the exit.
Yep, and is like,
So
so
I was like,
good.
"Wait, what?"
Ooh, ooh.
uh,
It's true. For like, I
yeah,
like movies that end like kind of on a positive note, and this is an interesting bittersweet one where it's like I almost feel like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, that's right. I want the robot to be happy. What has happened? How did I get here? But yeah, the death of Oscar Isaac is like both rewarding but also like a nice meal, and I love it.
yeah. But then, like at that point, like we're saying, like that he's right. Like his questioning of like her manipulation is proven to be right. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's like there is
Yep.
that kind of like,
There's
damn,
our only way.
maybe should have listened to him. Like.
Yeah, I mean, like even if you couldn't stand the way the material was coming towards you, he wasn't wrong in the idea that like there will be a competition, and we like unless we keep them as our captives, then we have to treat them equitably, and they'll never be equal to us. They'll always be smarter. They'll have access to more information than we do. Always. That's just like that's the nature of AI too.
Well, yeah, and the fact that like he's clearly like a stand-in for Google, right? Like
Yes.
Blue Book is like the name of it, but it's like
Yep.
the most when they say
Phones.
the most used web browser in the world, that's Google.
Yes.
And then like the fact that they're using our data to train AI, that is actually happening too. Like
Yes.
it's
Yes.
like very scary. Like and then when he confronts him about like, did you use my porn searches to make Ava? And it's like, oh god, dude,
He probably yeah, he did.
he did. He did.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's what's interesting too, to return to the Matrix briefly again, is like what makes humans capable of being able to command as much resources as AI is if they have it built in. Because the fact that Neo is born into the system and has that thing in the back of his
Yep.
brain is the way he's able to learn Kung Fu right away and have access to what an AI would have access to. So there's something interesting about that. And I remember reading a long time ago that Google had mastered storing data on living material.
Yeah.
So I know on organic material. So like at some point we will upload these things in, and that will be like our best chance of competing. One thing I forgot to say is Ava's amazing like facial situation. It's just like RoboCop. Remember when RoboCop like takes off his mask?
Oh, okay.
It's like a
Yeah.
little throwback, but like even RoboCop's like way more practical looking. But it just
I
like
thought
sort of is
that
the evolution.
I actually thought that when I was watching Dread, and that because you only see the bottom of Carl Urban's
Yep.
face the whole movie.
It's amazing.
which is wild, that like, it really takes an actor without any ego to do that, like that's why I give it up for him and like the Mandalorian with Pedro Pascal, like
Yes.
when you're acting behind a
I mean, it's
mask.
it's not just your face. Like I think the
Yeah,
best actors are people who can say a lot without words and then say so much without facial expressions. And yeah, this is an interesting exercise for I feel like Alicia Vikander to kind of do both in this
yeah.
story.
Yeah, when
Um,
she puts like on her full nude body thing and is like looking at herself and like, okay, I think I can work with this. You're like,
yep.
damn, she's found herself, she's like gone through puberty and like this is her
Yes.
development, to a full human adult and for what she thinks is, I guess,
Yeah,
it's a
a complete person as it were.
person. Yeah. So, yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah, yeah. All right, that takes us to our next segment called Exit Wounds.
Come on, don't bullshit me.
This is where we talk about the film's imperfections, decide whether they're fatal hits or just minor flesh wounds. What did you have, Shani B?
I think for me, at some point, someone would come looking for Oscar Isaac and Dumb Doll. So she would have to be able to, she'd have to be able to make sure they didn't come before they were dead. I almost was like, she maybe
Well,
should
she
have
could be
killed
long
Dumb
gone
Doll.
though. You
That's
don't
true.
know
They
where
may
she
never
is.
be able to find her, but
Yeah,
I did think, like, wouldn't the helicopter pilot be like, I dropped a man off. Who are
yeah.
you? I'm the only person that brings things to and fro this place. Where did you come from? I do feel
I
like
think.
that's a little yada yada at the end there.
Well, I think his only like line at the beginning where he's just like, "Yeah, I'll drop you off here. Figure it out." I'm like, it seems like they were like trying to make him be like he really doesn't give a fuck. Like this, he's just doing his job.
Yeah, he's definitely
And
not
so
connected to this in any meaningful way.
that one line kind of made me not question it, to be honest. Where he's just like, "Oh, it's you instead. All right, well, going
Yeah.
to the same place." Like,
Also, she's a pretty lady, so I also
yeah,
figured like, what why would he's not going to have take issue with like a pretty lady who's going to pretend to like him in the helicopter ride.
yeah. Use her manipulation tactics. Oh, when she's
Yeah, it's
doing
almost
that
like
that
go
quiz to
ahead.
him, like question one, lie, and like,
Yes.
and he's just like, damn, you're a lie detector test. Like, damn, I should
Mhm.
not be talking to you.
It's almost like people think that if you create AI as a woman, it's like maybe easier to control, but then you forget that like women are sophisticated and
Yep.
they have to be manipulative because they cannot use brute force. So it's
Hmm.
almost like actually female AI is maybe the riskier version.
True. And you can fall in love with it. We saw here with her.
I mean, they're definitely
um,
going to be way better at feigning a loving relationship than like a male robot could be. I
yeah.
mean, who knows? Because Jude Law is pretty good in AI.
Hmm.
AI? Is
Yeah.
that what it's
Artificial
called?
intelligence. Yep.
Okay, I was like, I've said AI so much over the past 2 weeks, I'm getting lost. Um,
um, mine are pretty similar to yours. Like it's just like where is everyone that's working for him? You know what I mean? Like I guess they're like off site, like where Donald Gleason's working at, but it's just
right.
like I feel like any company worth millions of dollars, you would not be allowed to just do it by yourself. There's going to be boards and employees and
Shareholders and all that.
yeah, that are checking in or, like because yeah, you could get cabin fever. I feel like there'd just be some kind of concern that like this, we're just going to let this dude in this house by himself with this $1 million technology.
Billion.
Yeah, $1 billion technology. So but I get it. It's for the movie, to have something like that, those stakes that like small cast, small location. Understand that. I think Damo gets manipulated pretty easily too. It's like I understand that's probably why Oscar Isaac chose him. Because maybe he had some social, like there's a mention that like we look at people's Google searches, so maybe he was googling some like yeah, I don't have any
Yeah, like
friends,
I'm
something
lonely.
socially awkward, something like that. Um, but yeah, it seems like I feel like there could have been, if I had to extend this movie out, like maybe a couple more Ava tests. Like because they bring that up on the screen. That's the only like the text
The
cards.
text on screen, yeah.
Yeah, like session 1, session 2. So maybe like one or two more sessions where he like really like she gives him a reason to not trust Oscar Isaac and to fall in love with her because I did think it was a little fast.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you were watching this, can you remember if you thought that Kyoto was also a robot? Like, can you remember if you thought she was a real person when she came around, or if you thought she was a robot?
I don't remember. Yeah, like I said, I wish I did my first time, but I don't know. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I was so focused on Oscar Isaac's sketchiness that I didn't, question it. And like it does seem like something skeevy that he would have done. Like, yeah, I hired her because she doesn't speak English, so it's perfect.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
but watching it now, knowing it, I was kind of looking, and her movements are like very robotic in a way, like very like uniform when she's like crouching down, and placing the thing on the what is it, like coffee or whatever on Donald's bedside.
Yeah.
I noticed that like she's just the way she's doing things is like very uniform, which again it could be like maids are trained to do that sort of stuff too, to like be very, but I don't, yeah, I don't know, do you remember?
The first time I saw this, I just like I'm one of those people who, when I watch movies, I try to call out the ending before it happens. So I
Yeah.
was like, she's probably a robot, like not in a meaningful way, just
Yeah.
calling it. But
Uh-huh.
every time I rewatch it, I am more excited by the subtleties of what her character is doing. Because, like, if you pay attention as the story goes on, she is listening. She's doing things more on purpose. Like, I feel
Yeah.
like she spills on Domhnall on purpose to show him how much of an asshole Oscar Isaac actually is. She's
Yeah.
in his room watching his videos. Like, I think she can't speak, but she says a lot with her eyes
Mhm.
and her actions. And so I do feel like that's one of those things where I think it's an amazing reveal when you're like, oh my gosh, she's just an earlier rendition of this. But it is a great example of like, this guy treats both humans and robots like shit. So it's hard to
Yeah.
distinguish if he would have any kind of respect for anybody but himself.
Yeah, it's and her performance is great too. Like that, I that scene where she's like trying to take off her dress, and Donald's like, "No, no, 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 you don't have to do that. Like, what are you
Yep.
doing?" Because it just, I'm like, in my head, I was like, yeah, like Oscar Isaac's basically like a pimp, and he's like, these girls are like his, sex workers,
His harem. Yeah.
that he's like, dealing out. And so like that, I've seen that in other movies before where like, hey, you want to go, like those, sex workers trying to, entice their clients. And it would
Yep.
just reminded me of that, like, oh, this is so sad. But like she doesn't know that she's programmed to be that way, so that was like another tough
Very,
part.
yeah, a lot to think about. A lot to
Mhm.
think about in such a small movie, but that's why I like it so much.
Same. Yeah, this brings us to our last segment called Game Over, Man.
Get to the chopper!
And finally, this is where we rate the film out of 5 empty beer bottles, since Oscar Isaac is always a drinking.
Always empty.
What's
Yeah.
your rating? What do you give it?
I'm gonna go 4 bottles. Like I said, I do think, especially towards the end, there's some like, yada yading and like really shortened things that you have to just buy into, like that Donald would be that enticed by her that he would just basically like throw away all his training and why he's there for.
Yeah.
To not trust. I mean, Oscar Isaac is sketchy, but other like once he finds out the sex robot video, like I get it, but there's nothing else other than like him just being an asshole for him to like fully be like, all right, AI, and I'm fully trusting her and not him. It's
Yeah.
like so, but other than that, cinematography, gorgeous. I recently watched a YouTube video where Alex Garland broke down his favorite shots of all of his movies.
Ooh.
And the one for Ex Machina, can you guess it? You want to guess it, or do you want?
Oh, uh, I can't guess it. I don't know, but
Okay.
I want to know.
It's the final shot of Ava. Well, not the final shot, but like where Ava takes off in a helicopter over
Yes.
the mountain. He said
Mm-hmm.
that there was like one take. They were hurrying up because it was like the golden hour of the
It
sun,
is
and
beautiful.
so he's like the reflection that came off of the helicopter was like the perfect, stars aligning for the movie. Which again, yeah, it's a really beautiful shot. Kind of reminds me too of like the slow motion shots in Dread, with the water droplets and things like that, all glistening,
Yep.
which is what he picked as his favorite shot in Dread too.
There
So
it
I
is.
think I think there's something about the sunlight shots that he really he really
Yeah.
responds to. And then yeah, just I think the message is still very relevant, if not more now, about the dangers of AI, tech bro billionaires being mostly misogynistic and stupid, and
Yes.
should not be allowed to basically make the world their playground. But that is the society that we unfortunately live in. So, what an upbeat episode, right? I mean, oh god.
Hell yeah.
Don't you want to just like, fly a kite after this? So great.
A robot kite.
Yeah, just get an AI to do it for you. It's fine.
Exactly,
Yeah. What
exactly.
about you?
I give it 4 bottles also. This is one of my favorite movies. I don't know what it is about it, but there's just something about every piece of this. I love rewatching it. I love talking about it. I I love how the story unfolds. I love all the pieces. And like, that ending sequence is just so it is amazing because I think human beings forget to look around at the beauty of the world, and there's something about how like AI has a different relationship to the world, and there's
Mhm.
the looks on her faces as she sees the beautiful world outside when she's finally allowed to go out, all that stuff. It just does make me be like, that's right, I need to like be in nature more often, and this movie always reminds me of like beautiful nature. So yeah, I had to give it 4 because the FX still hold
Yeah.
up. It's good. And yeah, I really like the future worlds that Alex Garland is so interested in putting human beings into and seeing what they'll do with them. And this one's so good, it's close to perfect. Like most,
Yeah.
movies that I'd give this kind of score to, but yeah, oh man, this is one of my faves. I really love
Yeah, I
this
think
movie,
it
so
might be one of my brother's favorite movie, if not one of his favorite movies. So,
nice.
yeah, it's a great one, and I think it's a testament to that. Like, even though you know the twists, they still really hit you. They still like are impactful, and challenge who you're rooting for. I
Yes.
guess so. Yeah,
I love that.
it's great.
Yep, love that about him. Nice. All right, I think that wraps it up for us. Let's remind the people where they can find us.
Yes, get your fix and follow the show at We Stay Buff on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and Twitch at The Buffs. Follow me on all the socials at Misfit_minded and my website, misfitminded.com.
So you never miss a rep. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please leave a review, 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. And you can follow me on all the socials at It's Me, Shani B. Next week, we're going to be covering Kill Bill Volume 2. You can watch along with us on Netflix. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time for another edition of Movie Buffs. Until then, stay
Stay
buff.
buff.